Yeah, HMR here. To answer a question that's been asked a lot on the channel recently, due to something I think I said in one of my recent videos, and it might have been the one about X hoovers and how what people at BPD hoovering say kind of replicates the deception, which they don't do on purpose or consciously, of the BPD idealization. So the question has been asked in a few different videos, a few different ways. I've got a few other videos up explaining this, which maybe I'll try to link some under here when I get a chance. So what I've said is that when people recycle, so when you get hoovered or you reverse hoover and you go back into the relationship after the BPD relationship breakup and you're recycling in the relationship again, that what happens is a high percentage, like 97% or more, who knows, but most of the time, almost always, but I can't say always, but I don't want to give anybody any false hope. If the person with BPD isn't in treatment, and if you're not getting help for your codependency, etc., then nothing's going to be different. And that's what happens most of the time. So people recycle in the relationship into it again, like do-overs, and a lot of people who are the loved one or the ex of somebody with BPD, whether you have codependency, whatever the case, the non-borderline thinks often that it was your fault. That if you could have just not done this or done that better, that the relationship would have worked out with that person with BPD, which is not really usually the case or true. So when people go back into the relationship with the ex the first time, things are going to speed up. And I've said sort of like the splitting cycles speed up, okay? And so what happens is that that relationship effort will fall apart and you'll end up in another BPD relationship breakup or getting ghosted again or whatever the case much more quickly than the first time. And then if you're recycling the third time, you're going to end up going around getting hurt, the whole thing happening again and being over again much faster than the first and second times. And if you do it for a fourth time, it's going to be much faster than the third, the second, and the first, etc., etc. So, what is that about? Well, like I've referenced before in other videos, I stand by that it's like the splitting cycle is sped up. But then I got to thinking about it yesterday when I read like four of these comments in a row on a couple on the same video, but on ostensibly three or four different videos. And what I realized was, so in a way, yes, there could be a splitting cycle speeding up because sometimes the person with BPD hoovering, or if you reverse hoover, but more to the point, if they hoover you, you're still in contact, and so this is possible, then they might get back to, I want to say, a wee bit of idealization. And so that will end more quickly, but you're never going to get back to the original number one first time idealization experience. And so that's obviously what a lot of people are recycling back, trying to get, trying to capture, trying to experience again, in the hopes that the person that you love with BPD can be really more that person, but they're still not going to be able to be that person who you fell in love with, who you thought they were. So, more to the point, what I'm here to just say a little bit more succinctly is, yes, the splitting cycles and the whole relationship cycle and how it will devolve and break apart again gets faster and faster every time people recycle through these relationships with an ex, the same person, right? But more to the point, what really happens more often than not is that there is no re-idealization on the part of the person with BPD. So first of all, there's a lack of idealization or re-idealization, which means they're sort of coming at you, usually, not always, but from a less intense place, but still equally as needy a place, wanting to get back together, etc. Maybe many different points of what's most important about that to you and to your ex, about to be, quote, partner, unquote, again. And then what happens is, why these cycles are faster and the relationships will end quicker and quicker every time you try. And quick doesn't mean it ends in a day or an hour or a week or 2 weeks, but it could. I've had clients where it ended seriously within like days, and or to a week or two, and some longer. But these cycles speed up, and yeah, there's something to it, can be splitting cycles. But if the person with BPD doesn't get, well, they won't get back to the initial idealization. So that's one thing. The second thing is they might have a little bit of idealization again, but not like the first time. And so then that's going to be a split to devalue much quicker. And the reason, so there's excuse me, the reason for that is because they really don't, like, everything is going to replicate itself because the person with BPD hasn't changed, and you, likely a codependent, you haven't changed. So there's this sort of like best behavior time and the newness of trying again, which really kind of isn't so new after a while, because all of that lack of resolution on that happened with the BPD relationship breakup, now you're recycling back, you're getting back with the ex. Well, you have to consider all the episodes, all the difficulties, all the times you tried to get them to understand what they were doing, or they couldn't take personal responsibility. All of those times are also lack of closure each episode. So they accrue. And then there's a damage that you've accrued, even if you still love them. So this is why this is a highly codependent thing to do, to recycle back into the relationships in the first place. And then the other aspect of this I just really want to cover, which is the key part of why do, when you recycle back with the ex, the first time it's going to end and usually not work out and end faster. The second time, if you do it, it'll end even faster. The third time, even faster, is because there is that lack of, there can only be a small degree of idealization, if any. So often there's no idealization, no re-idealization, no idealization. They're just in this sort of like wanting you back place and trying to not be alone and whatever it is they need, and consciously, or maybe not consciously aware of it. You're looking to get back that person. You're looking to maybe say, well, do something different. You think it's going to work. So why these recycling the relationship with the ex and faster each time is because there's nothing in between. There's very little in between the person with BPD, if they're still remaining untreated especially, very little in between them and the split to devaluation that can occur much more often, much more frequently, because the person with BPD, for lack of a better way to put it, is essentially only suspended, so to speak, in a base state, a base emotional state of not being dysregulated and splitting to devaluation, to devalue you. So there's less room there, because before they were in high idealization in the beginning of the first try, right? The first relationship. And now that's not there. So there's the newness factor, or the getting back together factor, that doesn't really mean re-idealization on the part of the person with BPD. And so what happens there then is the split. So they're in a base mood state. They're in a place where, okay, they're opening up again to try again. But when a person with untreated BPD is opening up, it's not really like opening up. But and so they're going to encounter all the same difficulties inside as they had in the relationship the first time, before the first BPD relationship breakup. So then what's going to happen is they start to feel stress or anxiety, or triggered, or like they still can't trust you, and they'll get into all the same cycles again. And now they're not going from idealization to the split to devaluation. They're going from wanting to try this again, and not maybe understanding exactly what drives that for them. Just as a lot of people with codependency aren't maybe as consciously aware as you could be what's driving it for you. Because if you were more consciously aware, and I mean this with all due respect, you would stop the cycle, right? Because that's what invariably will happen. People will need to face that at some point or other. So with people that are untreated with BPD, and again, I'm speaking generally, it applies in most cases, like a high, like 97%, but there could be something different happen, but people really shouldn't bank on that. So then the other point I'm just trying to make here to drive this point home for people that want to consider it or understand it better is that so these people are only when you recycle back with the X with BPD and you're in the relationship again, why it's going to end faster and faster each and every time if you retry multiple times, recycle multiple times through that relationship again is because there's no buffer there. So the same issues exist between you and the person with BPD and you, or for each of you. And so pretty soon the newness of relating again and being back together is going to get challenged by what happens for people with untreated BPD. And they're going to get triggered. They're going to have another, response, reaction to a trigger and or whatever their patterns were before, and whatever that looks like for each person with BPD, then you're going to be re-experiencing whether it's a jade conversation or they're yelling at you or they're giving you the silent treatment or whatever it is that is their pattern. That's going to happen again faster. So split to devaluation occurs much faster and much more often because all the same issues are there. Person with BPD hasn't got any more treatment, or if they've just started, then they haven't had a chance to really learn and grow and understand more about how to relate and what splitting is and how to find themselves. So these relationships, recycled relationships, will go around and end faster and faster every time you try because there is no idealization or very little, but not the same as the first time. The idealization is missing, and so they're in a base mood state, and that's closer to, always closer to, a split to devaluation. And then they're going to go to the split to devaluation because they're going to get triggered again, and the triggers are within them, but just trying to relating is too much for a lot of people with untreated BPD. And it's got to do with all the emotions and the triggers and what they don't understand consciously, unless until they get significant treatment, and how they can't regulate what's happening inside of them. And then they're going to externalize it out onto you again, unless they internalize quiet BPD, and they're going to pull away or ghost you again, or give you the silent treatment or some, combination. So it's lack of idealization. It is base mood that they're in, that they're trying to then extend themselves to relate to you again with. And what I mean by that is all they're going through internally, that they're not consciously aware of that struggle. And then people with codependency haven't changed. And so it's going to be the same thing again. Issues are going to happen, triggers are going to happen, same behavior is going to repeat itself. People with codependency are going to end up being hurt again and feeling rather like the same as you did in the initial relationship, or phase recycle 2 or recycle 3 or recycle 4. So the lack of idealization means they're closer to the split to devaluation. That's going to happen much more quickly and much more often because all the relational issues that remain unresolved between you and the person with untreated BPD are still unresolved, and they're still not going to be resolvable, and nothing's changed. And so these cycles, and I know this from 30 years of working with clients, that more than anything else is what informs me, these cycles just speed up every time. So no, really rarely is there any re-idealization, and if there is, it's like but a little bit of what you had the first time, and then that won't last long. So they're in base mode, wanting to try something without the tools still, and with all the unresolved things that happened the first or second or third or fourth recycle compounding in relationship recycling with an ex with BPD. They're going to have all of that still there. They still can't trust. They haven't had therapy. They haven't been able to change. People with codependency are going to be in the same patterns. And before you know it, the split to devaluation is just going to happen more frequently, more often, get more severe, and then they're going to be out of there, or you're not going to know how to continue, or they're going to ghost you over and over and over again. So that's why recycling back through the BPD relationship with the ex is going to end up in you being spit out and hurt, and like it's over again faster and faster with each try. And you're not going to ever get back to being idealized the way you were the first time when you first met them. And they're still not going to be able to trust you. And like I said too, All those issues that happen in the relationship, the first one, and it broke up and didn't work out, they're going to be really ripe and ready and waiting there, especially within the person with BPD. Their inability to trust, you're trying to rescue and fix them, and just the ways that these relationships really don't work when somebody has untreated codependency and somebody has untreated BPD. You're just trying to recycle back into that unhealthy bond, and when you're cycling back into the same situation, even though it might not seem like it, you have hope. Everybody thinks it's going to be different. That's why it ends up going faster and faster each time, because it just dysfunctions more quickly. It just gets to the brass tacks of breaking apart, falling apart, being really, the difficult relating, the poor behavior of people with BPD, people with codependency trying harder to make it work, and you just get back into that conflict that both sides actually drive, but people with BPD, more to the point, untreated, can't help but relate in the ways that they do because they don't have any more conscious awareness, and then they still won't be understanding how they impact you. So it's like when you recycle back into the relationship, you're expecting change, but from where and from whom? Because if you're codependent and you haven't worked on that yet, and they have BPD and they haven't sought treatment yet, and significantly for a period of time at least, then it's just a recipe for disaster. And this is a repetition compulsion, recycling back to relationships with the same person that both the codependent and the person with BPD share. And it's a nightmare, and people get hurt. So I hope you'll think about that. I hope that that helps people understand. Maybe there's more I can say to explain it even better, but I hope that is a beginning that will be helpful for people who've asked the question again recently. So take care.